They had been told Americans were demons, monsters with claws who devoured children, savages who showed no mercy. But when they finally saw them, they froze. The enemy didn't have horns. He had freckles. The enemy didn't snarl. He smiled. What happens when everything you've been told to fear turns out to be a lie? For years, their world was painted in fear. In Tokyo, Osaka, and every village between, the posters covered the walls. Grotesque caricatures of American soldiers, hulking beasts with fangs and claws, trampling Japanese children beneath their boots. The radio crackled with warnings. The newspapers screamed headlines of atrocities. The Americans will defile you. They will torture you. Death before dishonor. Keiko was 19 when she became a nurse. Fumiko, 22, worked in a munitions factory on Okinawa. Sachiko translated documents for the Imperial Army. They were ordinary women caught in an extraordinary nightmare. They had been taught one truth above all others. Surrender was not survival. It was a fate worse than death itself. To be captured by Americans meant unspeakable horror. Better to die with honor than fall into their hands. This wasn't just propaganda. This was their reality. And so when the bombs fell and the islands crumbled, when the Emperor's voice finally broke through the static with words they never thought they'd hear, "We surrender," their terror was absolute. The monsters were coming. August 15th, 1945. The war ended not with glory, but with silence. Keiko sat in the ruins of a field hospital, bandages still in her hands. Fumiko hid in a cave with 14 other women, listening to the sound of American trucks approaching. Sachiko burned documents in a courtyard, watching smoke rise into an uncertain sky. None of them knew what would happen next. They only knew what they had been told. When the Americans arrived, the women expected the worst. They huddled together. Some wept. Others closed their eyes and prayed. A few clutched hidden blades, not to fight, but for a final choice if the propaganda proved true. The truck engines grew louder. Boots hit the ground. English voices called out, words they couldn't understand, tones they couldn't interpret. And then he appeared. He couldn't have been more than 20 years old. Sandy hair, a sunburned nose, a smile that seemed impossibly out of place. He held up his hands, palms open, empty, and spoke softly. Then he reached into his pack and pulled out a canteen. Water. He offered it to the nearest woman. She stared at him, paralyzed. This was the demon? This boy? Another soldier appeared. This one had dark curly hair and tired eyes. He was chewing gum, actually chewing gum, as if this were the most ordinary day in the world. He pulled out a pack of cigarettes and gestured, asking if anyone wanted one. Fumiko later wrote in her diary, "They looked so clean, like they had just come from home, like they had mothers who washed their uniforms." One by one, the women emerged from their hiding places, slowly, carefully, waiting for the mask to slip, for the monster to reveal itself. But it never did. The young American with the sandy hair, his name was Tommy, they would learn later, knelt down to eye level with an older woman who was trembling. He didn't touch her, didn't rush her, he just waited. Then he smiled again, pulled out a photograph from his pocket, and showed it to her. A picture of his family, his mother, his little sister. The woman's eyes filled with tears. Keiko watched this unfold and felt something crack inside her chest. Not her ribs, but something deeper, something she had built to survive. "These are the Americans?" someone whispered in Japanese. "They're just boys." That night, in a makeshift camp, the American soldiers brought them food. Real food, not much, but more than they'd seen in months. They set up tents. They brought blankets. One soldier, seeing a woman shivering, gave her his own jacket. The women sat together in small groups, speaking in hushed tones, trying to reconcile what they were seeing with what they had been told. The propaganda had promised demons. Reality had delivered humans. In the weeks that followed, the dissonance only grew. The Americans were firm but not cruel. They were tired, homesick, and eager to go back to places called Kansas and Ohio and New Jersey. They showed photographs of sweethearts. They shared chocolate bars with children. They played baseball in the mud and sang songs around campfires. They were the enemy. But they were also just young men. Scared young men, far from home, who wanted the war to be over just as much as anyone else. Sachiko wrote in a letter that was never sent, "If they are human, what does that make us? What have we done? What were we told to do?" One evening, Fumiko found herself sitting across from a soldier named Jack. He was trying to learn Japanese phrases from a small book. He pointed to the word for friend and looked up at her, hopeful. She nodded, smiled, just barely. And in that moment, she understood. The propaganda hadn't just lied about the Americans. It had lied about everything. About strength and honor. About who deserved humanity and who didn't. About what made someone a monster. The real monsters were the lies themselves. In seeing the faces of their enemies, they saw their own reflection. Young people, manipulated by old men, taught to hate, taught to fear, taught that the other side was less than human. And now, sitting in the same mud, under the same sun, eating the same rations, the truth became unavoidable. They had all been children of the same war. Different uniforms, different languages, different lies, but the same war. War told them lies. Truth revealed itself in a smile. For years, propaganda had drawn monsters where faces should have been. It painted the enemy as inhuman, so that fighting them would feel righteous, so that killing them would feel necessary. But when the fighting stopped, when the smoke cleared, and the silence settled in, they discovered what propaganda fears most: the humanity of the enemy. A canteen of water. A photograph of home. A young man with freckles who was just as scared as they were. This is the story of every war, in every nation, across every border. We are all taught to see demons, until the day we see the face behind the mask. And on that day, everything changes. The most dangerous weapon in war is not a bomb. It's a story that convinces you the enemy isn't human. And the most powerful act of resistance is to refuse to believe it.